Rob, have you ever gone into a project thinking that it's going to be so easy? This isn't going to take any time at all, only to find yourself buried in deep despair and frustration, and something that you thought would maybe take an hour ended up taking you 2 days.
Yes, because I have come to understand that there's only really two states of getting things done. State number one is that you think it's magic and you have no idea how it will ever get done, so you just don't even do it. The other state is that, oh, I could build that skyscraper 15, 20 minutes. It's not going to take me much time at all. So yes, you go in thinking that it's going to be easy and you find out, oh, there's like, it's like a fine Swiss watch that just exploded and you have no instructions and you're trying to put it back together.
We didn't talk about how we were going to start this episode, but you gave me chills because that is exactly how I see every problem. Is this isn't going to take me any time at all, or I have no idea how I'm going to do this.
Right. There's no in between.
No,
there is no in between. It's one or the other. It is a binary choice.
You've completely summed up my adult life. But for today, I want to tell a story where this happened to me. The very first time, Rob, it was like just a couple months after we met. I created a Thanksgiving episode for Kilowatt where we play a Jeopardy game, and it's just, it's supposed to be fun for the holidays. And on that particular episode, there was me, you, Steve Sheridan, Allison Sheridan, and then the Jeopardy board, which was a screen share. It had all of our audio. It had sound effects. And I had to edit that in a relatively short amount of time. And I even procrastinated because this is one of those where you're in between. This isn't going to take long, but I don't know how to do it moments. And I started, the episode's supposed to go out on Thanksgiving. I started the day before Thanksgiving at like maybe 8 a.m. And I edited all the way. I stayed up late even. I edited all the way until like 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving night, ignoring my family, ignoring the people that came over to my house. I mean, I was in the room, but I wasn't in the room. And the problem was, Rob, is I had all of these assets that I needed to bring in to Final Cut, which is what I used to edit. But you could apply this to any editing program that you use. I had all these assets that I had to bring in. All of them needed to be organized. And I just brought them in completely raw. Like I just brought everything in and was hoping for the best. And because of that, we're talking about an hour-long episode with all of those people, all of that sound, and all of those little fun additions that you make to make shows entertaining. I didn't have any organization for that. And now what I would do for this is I would use Riverside. So we used Riverside to record that episode, but Riverside will actually export a timeline and it will mostly organize all of this stuff for you. And that is the problem that we're going to solve today.
Okay.
So I want to make sure this is clear. This is the workflow, whether you're using Final Cut, Premiere, DaVinci Resolve. You could use the same workflow, whether you're using any of those products. Also, if you're using Descript or StreamYard to record, they have an export timeline function as well. So that is, even though I'm using Final Cut and Riverside, this applies to a lot of different software packages and services out there.
Like basically, if you edit in anything that's basically got a timeline where you're going to see your tracks for your audio, your video, and your assets, you can export and probably import it into that and then do your final editing there.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump into the first part of the workflow, which is exporting your timeline from Riverside. All right, here we are in the Riverside projects folder. As you can see, we have all of the recordings that Rob and I have done over the years. For this example, I'm going to look for a recording that has Rob's video and audio, my video and audio, and then a screen share that we did of, in this case, our podcast notes. So we have 3 different video files and 2 different audio files for this example. So I'm going to select on this one right here. On this screen, we're just going to select Edit. And that brings us to the Riverside editor. Now, normally I don't do anything inside the Riverside editor, but I want to call your attention to the timeline, which is down at the bottom of the page. If you look, you can see that there are chapter markers. So chapter 1 is soundproofing and studio setup, and chapter 2 is podcast promotion strategies, and so on and so forth. If Rob and I were to talk about something that I thought might be important and want to highlight it, or maybe I wanted to cut that out and make a social media clip, I can actually drop my own marker in to Riverside. And then when I export this timeline to Final Cut or Premiere, what's going to happen is all of these chapter markers and comments and markers that I've placed in the episode, those are going to transfer over to Final Cut. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on Export and show you that now. So you'll be presented with a couple of different options: video, audio, and timeline. We want to choose timeline. For the format, if you're working in Premiere, choose Premiere. If you're working in Final Cut, which I am, we're going to choose Final Cut. We also want to include comments, markers, and chapters. And then we're going to export the timeline. And this takes just a few minutes for it to export the timeline. Okay, now the file is ready to be downloaded. It is actually going to be downloaded in a zip file. So I'm going to name this Riverside Export Timeline. And then I'm just going to hit save. All right, Rob. So that is exporting from Riverside. I don't think this is too difficult. I think this is pretty straightforward.
So buddy, let me stop you and ask you a question. You can edit in Riverside. What is your reason for saying, well, even though I can't edit in this thing that I'm using to do my recording, I'm still going to take my assets out of Riverside into Final Cut and do my final editing there? What is your reason or rationale for doing that?
There's two reasons. One's irrational, which is I like to have all of the control. And the second is I'm often not editing at home. I'm usually editing on the go, whether it's in a coffee shop or at work, which we have garbage internet at work, or in my car. So for me, I need to have reliable internet to be able to edit inside of Riverside, and I don't always have reliable internet.
Okay, so it is, you can physically have the files on your laptop. In the car, you don't need internet connectivity, and that's one of the main reasons why you do it.
Correct.
Okay, makes sense.
All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through the actual triaging of the episode. And in this particular clip that we're going to watch, I'm going to show you where the chapter markers come in. I'm going to talk about markers that you would add during the recording of the episode. And then we're going to triage my audio and triage the video. And when we do this, normally you would hear audio when I'm scrubbing across. You would hear like somebody talking really fast. That ended up being very distracting. So your version will not include that. Your version is just going to include, you can see the waveform and you can see where I'm making my cuts, but I left out the audio just because it is distracting to the video.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so we've unzipped the downloaded file, and now we have my audio, my video, Rob's audio, Rob's video, as well as our screen share, which was just some notes that we were sharing for the episode. Over here, we have the Final Cut XML file, and this holds all of the timeline data, like clips, edits, transitions, metadata, like clip information, keywords, and markers. And then also if we did any sort of color grading or effects or audio synchronization with video, that's all going to be included in this file. So let's go ahead and double click on this. It's going to ask us, do we want to import this into a current library or do we want to create a new one? I'm going to create a new one and I'm just going to call it testing because that seems easy. And then here we go. I'm going to double click on the timeline that populates down below. You can see down here we have our screen share, we have Rob's video, my audio, and Rob's audio. So I'm just going to mute by pressing V on the keyboard to mute my audio and mute Rob's audio. That way you don't have to listen to it as I'm scrubbing through the timeline. Another thing that I would like to call out here is that these little orange markers, these are actually the chapter markers. So this is really convenient because we have chapter markers all the way across when we are changing subjects. This all came over from Riverside. But right here, I know that Rob and I, when we were talking about the stuff that's in our document, I know that wasn't at the beginning of the episode. We actually talked about this much later in the episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the chapter marker that's attached to the screen share, and it says actionable content for listeners. And I know that if I go down, it's a little bit further down. So that one says short form versus long form content. The next one is actionable content for listeners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this all the way down here. It's not in the perfect spot, but for right now, that's in the area that it needs to be in. Another thing I want to point out is if I had set a marker in Riverside, then it would show up here, somewhere along the timeline, wherever I had set it. So, for instance, if Rob and I went off topic, I can set a marker at the beginning of us going off topic, and then when we get back on topic, I could set another marker, and I can make comments in those markers. And that allows me to kind of have a roadmap when I'm doing my editing and decide, do I really want to keep this or not? So now I'm going to show you how I triage the episode. So I'm going to go all the way to the beginning here. I'm going to start with my audio. Now, I know in the very beginning of this episode, I was drinking a soda. So if I come back to this very beginning area here, I can scroll through. And I can hear, I'm talking to myself, playing with something on the desk. And then that's where I start talking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the B tool for Blade. And I'm just going to select that portion of audio. I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to delete it. And I had some allergies when we were recording this episode. So I know that somewhere around the line here, that's kind of a sniff, but it's not super loud. There's a sniff right there. I'm going to take out the sniffs so people don't have to listen to them. Now, as I continue through, this whole thing takes just a few minutes. It doesn't, I can get this audio done in less than 5 minutes. Once I'm done with my audio, and then I will go to Rob's audio, and I will do the same thing to his. But I will say that Rob is much better at this than me. I almost never have to take anything out of Rob's audio. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to triage the video. I'm not going to do the whole episode with the audio because that might be boring for you folks. So I'm going to triage the video. So you notice that Rob is up top. He is the only person on screen, even when I'm talking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Blade tool again with the B. I'm going to select at the beginning of my waveform, and I'm going to select at the end of my waveform. And then I will highlight Rob's video, and I could either hit V and mute it, or I can delete it. In this case, I'm going to delete it. So I'm just going to check the beginning to make sure this comes in where I want it to. And then I'm going to check the end and see if I'm happy with the way this comes across. And I am. So I'm going to go back to this other section over here. And this is where I'm talking. I'm going to do this just the same thing again. I'm going to select B, select Rob's video, go to my waveform, select B again at the end of the waveform. And then I'm going to, I'm going to push this out a little bit, and then I'm going to delete it. So, testing the beginning of the video. Okay, I like the way that looks. And then I'm going to go to the end. I like the way that looks. Now, if for some reason I cut too much off, So I'm still on camera when Rob's talking. These are non-destructive edits that I'm making. So I can just pull Rob's video back to where I think it's going to work the best and then play it again. And that's it. And I'm going to do that same thing all the way down the timeline. I'm going to mute the video here for just a second. And then when I get to the screen share, I'll just wait till it's most appropriate wherever it is in our conversation, and I'll move the screen share to where it needs to be, and then I'll cut it depending on what we're talking about. And you'll notice here there's a lot of dead space at the end of the episode. I'll just go ahead and get rid of that. All I need to do is a Command-Shift-B, and that cuts all of the tracks at that moment, and then I highlight them, and I can delete it. And that is how I triage each episode. All right, Rob. So that is the whole process for triage for me. And like I said in the video, this only takes me 10 minutes, and then I'm able to concentrate on the fine tuning after that. I don't have to, go through, watch the video, make a cut, and then think, oh, do I want to keep this or not? Like once I get that rough triage done, then I'm able to sit down and actually pay attention to the content. And I think that's really important, because if you're trying to edit while you're trying to pay attention to the content, sometimes that could be very overwhelming. So by getting that off of my plate early on and then just concentrating on the content, I think it produces a better product.
So, Bodhi, how much time would you say this saves you if you were to have to do this without actually using the timeline export from Riverside, and you just did it the old way that you did that show for Thanksgiving? How much time are you saving yourself by being able to export the Riverside timeline?
So this episode was about 42 minutes long, and I feel confident in saying at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours.
So you saved 2 hours.
Yeah, because going through this, I'm going to go through it. This is how I edit. And this is maybe not how everybody edits. I used to go through it and edit as I went, and then I would go through it again and edit for content, right? So I'd basically watch this episode twice.
Okay.
And that was not a good way to go. And because these are non-destructive edits, I'm able to just go through and willy-nilly cut without worrying too much about not being able to get that back, because it's all still there. You're just not seeing it on the timeline.
So yeah, and so what would you say your total edit time is? If you're saving 2 hours, what is your time now that you are taking to create that 42-minute video?
I could probably do this in an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes.
So you're cutting out 60%. 66% of the time that it takes you to edit simply by being able to export a timeline.
Yeah, and I will fully admit that there are plenty of things that I could probably doing to be even more efficient than that. But if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out the tools, you're trying to figure out how to edit, how to properly cover up a mistake and all that other stuff that happens when you're brand new, that's a lot of cognitive load. And it is exhausting. And again, it goes back to, oh, did I cut that one part out because we made reference to it over here now? If I don't have to have that cognitive load on there, it's not so much. I mean, I'd love to save the time, but for me, I want to create a really good product. And for me to be worried about where I need to make my cuts while I'm paying attention to content, it just adds confusion and unnecessary frustration.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. And I'm not an editor. I have just been playing around with, I want to do a YouTube short, or I want to do maybe even some 7, 8, 10 minute longer form stuff. And before I go hire somebody to do it, at least let me know what it is that I'm hiring them to do. So I've been playing around with editing tools, and you're right. It can be very, very time consuming. I can edit audio probably at 250% speed of the actual audio itself. I've been doing it so long. I just, I don't even need to listen sometimes. I can just look at the waveform and just kind of know. But that's because I've been doing.
You know what's an and what's not an
Yes, exactly. I could tell when somebody sneezes. You just know what those things look like in the waveform. But that took 20 years to get to where I could do that. With audio, I don't have any knowledge about editing audio other than like using like Movie Maker back in the day from on a Windows PC. It's just, I've never been into, I've said audio. Yeah, definitely meant video. I've just never been into doing any type of editing a video. So now when I do it, these kind of tips and tricks, they absolutely help you speed out. And that's one of the reasons why I never got into it. It's so time consuming. It was, for me, that, that juice just was not worth the squeeze of the amount of time that it took. But this seems like if it's saving you 60 to 66% of your time just by exporting a timeline out, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, it as with anything, Rob, how you edit is very personal. I have a friend who's a programmer. He works for Epic. He's at a very high level there. And I said, how do I do this? And he goes, it depends not on just what you want to accomplish, but how you're going to program all of the stuff in front of that, right? And that same thing kind of applies to how you edit. So all of this is personal to you. So you can take something that we talked about today and you can add that in, but maybe all of it doesn't work is what I'm really getting at here. And that's okay. And we would like to hear back from you. How do you edit? How do you make things more efficient? And that just kind of makes us all better. All right. Rob, why don't we end that here? Where would people go to support the podcast if they like what we're doing?
Everything is beyondthepost.fm. So if you head over to beyondthepost.fm, you will find a little landing page where you can find us on Patreon. You can email us, all that kind of stuff. So just beyondthepost.fm. That's how you're able to find both of us.
Perfect. And you can email me. It's bodie@beyondthepost.fm and Rob's with 2 B's. So rob@beyondthepost.fm.
That's right.
Perfect. All right, Rob. I think we did a good deed today.
Someone will be blessed by this because I'm telling you, man, you save somebody a couple hours and it takes you 3 hours and you save them 2, they are going to be very happy.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, take care and we will see you next time.